So here we are with Fred Padula for the third part of his interview. And here Fred is going to talk us about one of his most famous documentaries, which is El Capitan, in which he documents the lifestyle of climbers and especially what they do in the so-called Californian style of climbing.
They call it rock climbing.
Rock climbing, yeah.
Versus climbing of the mountain, which is a lot of trekking.
A lot of trekking.
Most of it is just straight up.
All right, so I leave you, the word, Fred, and you were telling me something very interesting about this movie shortly before.
Well, this film came about through a student of mine who took a photo class from me, and he was very talented, and I was also teaching film in the film department at the same time. I told him he should make a film. He should come to my class and make a film. Yeah, he had expressed a couple ideas to me. And so he made a film, a short film, maybe 15 minutes long, which I thought was really very good. And in fact, it won grand prize at Trento one year when he entered it. And then as we got to know each other better and better, he said his dream was to make a film of climbing El Capitan. He was like the third or fourth time El Capitan was ever climbed. He was really one of the big Yosemite climbers of his day.
Yeah, to those who don't know, El Capitan is a famous...
3,000 feet straight up.
Yeah, it's a 3,000 straight up climb in Yosemite Valley.
In Yosemite Valley in California. And he had climbed this along, and it had been climbed about 2 or 3 times before he climbed it. But when he climbed it, he decided this would be a great experience to make a film of this. Up until that time, there weren't too many climbing films around. The technology made it difficult. Today with digital, it makes it very easy to make a film. But in those days, making a film was very awkward, just very difficult. You're dealing with a roll of film that only runs for a little over 2 minutes. You got to load the camera out in light, where film light gets to it and exposes a good portion of the film before you can use it, and before it kind of runs through the camera to where you can get to good film. It's just a lot of problems. You have to worry about dirt, to worry about stuff getting on the lens. I mean, just anything went wrong when you were using film in those days in that environment. Anyway, so he said, my dream is to make a film climbing El Capitan. And I knew, I'd been to Yosemite, I knew El Capitan, but I hadn't thought too much about it. And so that summer, my wife and I drove to Yosemite, and we thought, well, I think I'm going to walk up to El Capitan and see really what he's talking about. Well, you literally walk up this rock pile, and then you have to walk, and it's like a wall, literally a wall that grows out of the rocks and goes straight up for a kilometer, maybe more than a kilometer. What's 3,000 feet? About a kilometer straight up. And he says he's going to make a movie of 3 guys climbing this. And I thought to myself, oh, he's crazy. I mean, he's a very bright fellow, but I would think maybe he was going off on the deep end here. But I said, okay. I decided I would help him, see what we could do. And so we made some plans, and I said, well, I don't want to make a film with narration. I mean, I should say this. I suggest you try to make a film without narration. Let's see if we can capture the essence. In those days, wireless microphones only broadcast maybe 50 feet from the stage to the sound recording person on the other side of the stage. And we were trying to record sounds almost a kilometer away. So we built this giant antenna. And we had a 4-track tape recorder. We had to have this tape recorder made. They didn't make 4 tracks then, not ones that you could take to Yosemite. We had to get electricity from the Park Service to where the tape recorder was. And we had to have this receiver. And we had to equip wireless mics on the climbers. So they wore these, and they turned them on when they woke up in the morning. And they shut them off when they went to sleep. And we ended up with 30, 40, 50 hours of sound, just wild sound. And Glenn filmed. He was a really good photographer. He got some beautiful footage. But the film became increasingly expensive, And finally, we had spent more money than we had. And he got very discouraged. And he says, I don't want to worry about this anymore. I can't deal with it. One of the partners of the film had put money in, and he was complaining that you guys are taking too long. We're never going to get our money back. Or you should say, I'm never going to get my money back, he says. And you have to make a film that sells, and you guys are just making it an art piece. And Glenn was not a compromising person. And I felt like I was not the boss exactly. It was his film. But he came to me one day and he says, I don't want to have any more to do with it. He says something crazy like, if this film is a success, it'll popularize climbing. And I don't want climbing to be popularized. I want it to be exclusive for special people who climb, but nobody else. And which I didn't fully understand that. And he disappeared. That was it. He just walked away from it and left it. And so the film sat in my laboratory, my dark room, for 7 or 8 years. It was around my neck, literally. Mm-hmm. What am I going to do with this thing? I've got all this footage, beautiful footage. I don't know what to do. And then about 7 or 8 years later, I had looked at some of the footage during this time. So finally, I was no longer intimidated by it. I thought, I got to just do something with this. So I got all the footage out, went through it, and in maybe a month, I edited the whole visual part of it. It just, again, just kind of came together as I would do it with any musical composition. I did have the help of one of the climbers who made sure that that chronologically it had continuity. I didn't mix the climb up. He made sure that I progressed up the mountain accurately. But that was important. I didn't want to make something that was totally unreal. And then the fellow that really helped me was, well, 2 of them helped me. Lito, Tiana Flores, if you should ever see the film, and Dick McCracken. The 3 of us are still very good friends, it turns out. Dick helped me edit the footage. He edited the sound. We had 30 or 40 hours of sound. And he and I went through and cut out little bits that were interesting. And out of 30 hours of sound, we ended up with about 15 minutes that we could use. Just little anecdotes. And with that, I began to connect it to the footage that I had already edited. The challenge is that watching climbers climb on a rock, as somebody once said to me, is like watching paint dry. It's nothing more boring than to watch 3 guys up there fiddling around trying to climb this thing. It's very boring. Very exciting if you're the climber, but very boring to someone that's watching. And so I said, how do I make this work? And again, I approached it like a musical composition. You got to start slow and quiet and build up. And at some point, it's got to resolve itself and maybe work in a coda, recapitulation, and then end it as climbs end. They just kind of, you're done and you walk home. And that's pretty much what governed it. I added a few things to it that I filmed separately, like the moon sequence, and a few other things, but just put it together kind of intuitively. And but I think the success part of it was the fact that I let it sit for 7 or 8 years, got away from it. And then when I started looking at the footage again, I began to explore ideas. I was no longer fixed on the exhausting experience of filming it and doing that, because there were a lot of problems that we ran into that were just almost traumatic. By then, I had forgotten those, and I could just see the footage of the film like it was a new experience. And I took the pieces together over a period of time. It kind of came together naturally. And I was no longer inhibited. I didn't have to answer to Glenn, my student friend. I hadn't seen him for several years. I didn't have to answer anything. I could do what I wanted. The guy that had put up a lot of the money to make the film, I hadn't heard from him. I didn't feel like I owed him anything at this point. And it just kind of came together very quickly. Within about a month or so, the thing just kind of magically came together. And that's El Capitan.
The rest is what we know. And once again, I mean, from your recollection, the moment of editing was essential I mean, this is another film which is really rebuilt through the editing.
Yes.
And editing is your way of somehow re-elaborating experience.
And
then
discovering
really.
what you have.
And discovering what you have
Yes.
through experience. So what you have learned somehow is the result of this re-elaboration that you are making. And you make the thing intelligible to viewers, not only in terms of a logical sequence of events, but also in terms of the emotions and the inspiration at a level which is ineffable, which is beyond words,
Right.
that only film can somehow evoke
Right.
in you. This is what really makes me think that Fred is a very important person in terms not only of movie making, but also in terms of discussing what experience is, and how do we reflect on experience, how do we learn from experience.
I think, if I can interrupt,
Yes.
I try to make something, when I make a film, like a musical composition, if it's a credible piece of music, important piece of music, it's not composed to hear one time. It's something you can re-experience, you discover new themes, you discover new tones from the orchestra, you discover new styles, rhythms that you don't hear the first time. And when I make a film, I try to put enough information in that if you watch it several times, each time you watch it, you see one more, discover one more thing in the film. Because it's not a story per se, it's an experience. And I try to make it so that every time you watch it, there's one more thing that you discover in it. And so it's at many levels. The first time you watch it, you see these guys climb on Capitan, but there's a lot of sound and stuff that goes on that doesn't register. And you watch it again and you say, oh, I didn't hear that before. Oh, I didn't see that the first time. I want to make sure that there's more to discover as you watch it. And that's important. It needs to be on more than several levels. Not just a story, but just several levels of discovery. A challenge. You have to work with it. If you're not willing to get involved with the film, then you're going to miss what I'm trying to express. I'm trying to give you enough information, enough experience that my dream would be that you become one with the film, like you would with a piece of music at that level. And if I could do that, then I feel I've been more successful than just telling a story. I'm not interested in telling a story literally. That doesn't interest me. I want to get into your gut, and that's what I try to do with El Capitan. The subject is very slow, so I start the film out at the beginning very slow. You wonder what's going to happen. It's just one scene after another, and then the film builds. They get to the top, a little celebration, and then it just kind of whizzes away with the same theme that it opened with, same music that it opened with, and it's an experience that I hope you'll feel more here than here.
So this is a very interesting statement by Fred Padula. Telling a story, can also mean using elements from other fields of aesthetics, like for instance music, and use these elements to recompose and re-elaborate the data that you have filmed in a form that reaches your emotions in a way that is different from the usual logical discourse which might be used in documentary film. I think this is very interesting.
With the music, I take music from the Mayuzimi's Mandala Symphony, which I just happen to like. I knew the symphony well. I've listened to it many times. And it's Japanese. And there was something ephemeral about the whole experience. Not while we were filming, but later on when I started looking the spatial aspect of it and the mystery of the mountain. That influenced me to put the moon in. And I took about 8 bars, maybe a total of 20 or 30 seconds of the Mandala Symphony. And then I looped it, I slowed it down, I speeded it up, So you're hearing this music, same music, all the way through the film. I mean, you recognize the theme, and then it comes through again, and you kind of recognize the theme, and then it comes through again, and it's just a little different, but it still has the continuity of like a theme and variations, which is what I tried to do with the music. I also tried to do it with the birds. The birds come in and out at certain specific times. The pitons, hammering the pitons, that to me was like part of the symphony, the percussive part of the symphony, where at some point you hear the pitons, it reminds you of the sound and the space, because sometimes they echo, sometimes they are very dead sounding, like you're hitting a rock. So I was able to play with the sounds. These are sounds that we were able to record when we were actually filming. And so I played with all these things, not sort of, I tried to make the visuals just one of the elements. But there's the music, the sound, the climbers talking, the birds tweeting, and mandalas, Monozumi's music, which I altered. And working with all those elements, not allowing one to be more important than another, which you just try to, the elements you just try to work together and weave together. And that's my process of creating the editing process that we work with. You first have to start with pictures, you have to have film, but that's the starting point for me. And so that's El Capitan.
So this was Fred David Padula on his famous documentary El Capitan. Thank you, Fred, for giving us this unique insight into your work. And I hope that this may be useful to some of you and inspiring to the others. Thank you very much for listening, and goodbye.
I didn't thank you. But